Okay, and so now what we know about fear is that it's a spirit and it's bondage. It's bondage. And that bondage is very paralyzing. So that's what we know about fear. Um, and in getting into the overcoming part, overcoming fear, we have to move on to the first part of this title of this video, which is courage for freedom. And so, sometimes we hear about courage and we hear about people that have demonstrated courage, courageous people, um, and we think in our minds like they have the ingredients in them that are not present in myself, or that we hold them to this very high regard, and we almost see that attaining that level of courage as something that is impossible. Um, and in a way, we just lift them up on this high, very high pedestal. And it's great that we can respect people that have demonstrated courage. I think that's something to be admired, that they moved out on courage. That is something that is praiseworthy. Not that we worship them, because we should not. And I think that that's sometimes, not that people mean to, but sometimes they do that in a way. But it's worthy of admiration. It's something to be praised, something to be highly esteemed. That you have done this amazing thing. You stepped out on courage. You know, stepped out on courage and did something that was really in your heart to do, and hopefully, prayerfully, that was a good thing to do. The decision, the destination, the thing that you wanted to attain, to achieve, the ends. So even when we think about some of our civil rights leaders, in the Black Civil Rights Movement, of which Martin Luther King is highly esteemed. When I think about Martin Luther King, he demonstrated a lot of courage. He demonstrated a lot of courage. In fact, I have heard it said and even read that he did not necessarily, it wasn't his ambition to like lead a movement. He wanted to be a preacher and things like that. It wasn't something he just had in his mind from a young child, or anything like that, but it was something that as time went on and as circumstances began to arouse and there was a need had arisen for someone to take charge of this movement that was happening. Change needed to come. He stepped in, fulfilled that role. Other people wasn't even trying to necessarily fill it. It was his calling. I believe it was his destiny. Um, he didn't have to step into that role, but he did. He did. And there were a lot of risk within that. A lot of risk. And, cost to his family, himself. And he knew that. He wasn't blind to the things that were going on in the country. The the terror, the things that Black people faced, the things that he himself faced as a Black man, and the rest, the people that would come after him and be after him, because how dare you take on this role to bring about greater rights for the Black man, for the Black woman, for Black people as a collective. How dare you? And so the point is, though, I'm not going to go on and on in that, but just that he demonstrated courage by stepping into that role with all of the risk, with all of the danger to his immediate life. He stepped in and fulfilled that role. And so, I think a lot of people can see that, and we can think, that was so extreme. Even when we think about the other civil rights leaders, people within the movement, oh, that's such a high degree of courage. Even when we see courage demonstrated today, you know, the courage it takes to open a business, you know, what it takes to open a business, you know, courage and things like that. You know, there's those kinds of things, you know, and we can be like, oh, you know, that's not something that I can do. That's not something that's within me. But you know what? If you think about it, I think if we would speak more kindly to ourselves. If we would examine our thought life and be very aware of what it is we're speaking to ourselves and intentional about what it is we're speaking to ourselves and what it is we're speaking out loud and things like that, and the way we think about ourselves and doing what we feel in our hearts must be done, what we know is right, then we will get and we will attain and reach, and we will find that courage that we need to walk out this something to reach that destination that we want. And what is it that we're reaching for? Many times I believe that's freedom. Courage for freedom. You know, that we're not just getting courage in and of itself. Courage just to have courage, but there's a destination. There's something that we want to achieve. For Martin Luther King, for the other civil rights leaders, they knew that was greater rights, greater liberty for Black people who had been freed in this country back in, like, you know, there was the Emancipation Proclamation, but then that wasn't exactly respected and honored. And then, you know, so the war still continued. And then we see 1865 popping up and more Black people are finally being freed, and yet still in bondage, still with so many oppressions, still no right to vote, still at that time when they were freed as slaves, still, you know, facing segregated facilities that were not equal, all of that. And so he and others like him stepped into those roles, not exactly because they felt like, I just got it. You know, I just got it and I'm just going to step into this role. And, you know, I'm just like extra brave and everything like that. But because there was a need. And regardless of the risk, they knew the risk. They calculated the risk. Regardless of the risk and everything like that, what there was to gain was so important. It was so important. And, you know what? I remember seeing the movie recently of Harriet Tubman, the Harriet Tubman movie. And I know there was a lot of mixed reviews on that, but there was a line in there that I liked very much. You know, it was when, you know, Harriet was saying, you know, and I guess it was before her, whatever. Harriet was saying at the time, you know, it's either going to be liberty or death, you know. Basically something along those lines, you know, it was going to be liberty, she was going to be free, or she was going to die, but she was not going to stay a slave, you know. So I believe that in stepping into those roles, you know, that many of the civil rights leaders stepped into, that was the sort of mindset that they had to have, you know, even if it wasn't their immediate lives at that present time, you know, that was, you know, the idea, the mindset that they had to have, that even if it's going to cost me, because it's already costing us, it's already costing so many Black people all across the nation, but what about our children? We want them to be free in the way that they are meant to be free, and not looked upon and as a second-class citizen. And in some respects, not even seen as human. And so they stepped into these roles out of a need that had arisen. And so on today, you know, I just wanted to, and I meant to bring this up earlier, but I wanted to give to you a few definitions, like the definition of courage. And I'm sorry, it's getting kind of dark around here, and I don't want to turn on this artificial light. And I'm almost done with this video, so I'm just not getting up. Anywho, though, well, definition of courage is the ability to do something that frightens one. So it doesn't mean that you felt just fearless. You know, you felt some of that fear, you know, but in spite of it, you acted. In spite of it, you got up, you stood for something, you stood on something. You spoke the truth. The truth that was in your heart, you spoke. You acted. You walked out. And the definition of freedom: the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. So on today, I want to encourage you to have courage for freedom, to live fulfilling lives, to know that demonstrating courage is not something that's so far beyond you, but it can be just a prayer away. Honestly, just a prayer away. And that God loves you, and He loves you, and He wants a relationship with you even. And yeah, courage for freedom, y'all. Courage for freedom. Overcoming fear. And that is it. In overcoming fear, you know, overcoming fear is you stepping out. You stepping out despite how you feel. Despite the fact that you are somewhat afraid. You do realize some of the consequences, and those things kind of scare you. Maybe they more than kind of scare you. But despite that, you step out. That is courage. That is something worthy of praise. And with that, I'm ending this episode right here. Courage for freedom, overcoming fear. I want you to be blessed and have a great rest of your day and week. God bless you. Bye.